Kakadosh Boker Or, Bekiim Bahalacha, day 68, page 203, Halacha 52, Nun Bet. Yeah? We're talking about now filth or non-Jews between the Jews. Right? Filth, dirt. Yeah, dirt. If a non-Jew, right, a non-Jew, or an idol, or filth, here we have filth, is positioned between the Minyan and a person listening to the prayers. So imagine you have the Minyan and the guy. So a person is on the outside, or a person is there. Now there's a fsek, there's a pasek between them. What's a pasek? The pasek is going to be a non-Jew, an idol, or filth. It is forbidden for him to respond the Chazan's prayers. This restriction applies only if the listener is outside, right, the synagogue, and such an obstacle interrupts his connection to the Chazan. For non-Jew, is inside a synagogue. His presence is not an obstruction between the Chazan and the standing those seated behind him. They are permitted to respond to the Chazan despite the non-Jew's presence. So one more time. That means you could have a goy around, and you're right behind the goy. So the goy is like your pasek in between, your separation between, but you could still answer everything because you're in the synagogue and he's in the synagogue. But if it's going to be outside, right? Yeah, Bikat Levana or anything, whatever it is, right? And even though Bikat Levana doesn't really need a minyan, so it's a little bit different. But okay, but let's say for the Kaddish or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You have filth or this. So therefore, it's going to be a difference in the Chazan. So let's see the Mishnah, not the Mishnah, but let's see the footnote. Footnote is 371. Rabbeinu Yitzchak Avuhav, page 203 in the bottom. Rabbi Yitzchak Avuhav and the Orchot Chaim, both cited in the Bet Yosef, quoted a passage from the Yerushalmi, stating this halakha. In the Shulchan Aruch, Maran writes, if there are 10 men present in one location, and one of them says Kaddish or Kiddusha, even people who are separate from the location may answer. According to some authorities, there must not be any filth or a non-Jew between them. Okay? The Levushe Srad assumed that Maran listed two opinions here. And the Maran's choice in the first opinion is that he didn't have a problem. And there are those who say, therefore, a non-Jew or filth does not constitute an obstacle between the Chazan and the person listening. This is likewise the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. But the Kaf HaChaim, he asserted that there's no poskim who disagree with the ruling about the non-Jew or the filth. Manan added these words just to explain the halacha, applies, and when it is not, but there's no disagreement among the poskim regarding this. The Ben Ish Chai concurred with this, and this is the ruling of the Rishon LeZion, which means like this. One more time. Many times we know that there's a concept of stam v'yesh. Stam v'yesh means Maran brings something down in the halacha, like without any argument, and then sometimes he says, and there are those that say. Many times when we say there are those that say, we don't actually rule like that. Because if I tell you you're allowed to do that, but some say something else, okay, some say it. But the main thing is what I said at the beginning. Sometimes it happens that Maran brings down there are those that say, but it's not arguing on that which he said at the beginning. It was just that since nobody argued on it, but it was only found in one place, or whatever it is, so therefore sometimes they brought it down in that such a fashion. So that was the problem over here. Maran at the beginning said that you could answer, right? He just said, right, that you could answer. If there are 10 men present in one location, one of them recite Kaddish or Kiddusha, even people who are separate from the location, they can answer. Then he says, but some people say that you cannot have filth or non-Jew. So therefore, this Yesh Omrim, is it a Yesh Omrim that argues on the stam, and therefore we pass him like the stam, and that's the way that the Mishnah Berurah was learning, right, and the Levushe Srad. But the Kaf HaChaim, the Ben Ish Chai, and Rav Ovadia learned that it wasn't actually arguing. So therefore Maran actually holds of this, which means that if you have filth or a goy in between, you're not allowed to come and answer to the Shliach Tzibur, because he's considered a pasek. Okay, what about a non-Jew or an idol? A non-Jew or an idol. Shulchan Aruch states that it's forbidden to respond if there's going to be an akum between them. Magen Avraham interpreted akum to mean an idol or some object worshipped by the idolaters. But it is not referred to a goy, right? To a non-Jewish person that worships the idols. Therefore, he ruled that a non-Jew is not considered an obstruction. In the first printed edition of Shulchan Aruch, however, the term kuti appears, not the term akum. During the period when all Torah books were subject to approval of the Christian censors, it was common to replace the term goy with the term kuti, as if the passage referred only to Samaritans, who the Talmud called kutim. In subsequent editions of the Shulchan Aruch, the term goy is used. Beginning with Amsterdam edition in 5421, this term was replaced with akum, leading the Magen Avraham to interpret it as an idol and not as a non-Jew. Many Acharonim, right, whether it's Mishabura, Kavachaim, Sofer, pointed out the Magen Avraham erred in this case, since the intention of Shulchan Aruch definitely was a non-Jew, and therefore a non-Jew is considered an obstruction, and an idol is certainly an obstruction as well. Shulchan Aruch originally used the term goy in this halacha to not distinguish between a non-Jew who actually worships idols and one that does not. Therefore, a Muslim constitutes an obstruction, although he does not believe in idol worship. Maran Rishon LeZion cited in response with the Rambam, stating that the Muslim concept of God is correct and is free of any belief in idolatry. Regarding the halacha, however, a Muslim is equal to all other non-Jews, right? And he constitutes an obstruction. Oh wow. It says here, a Muslim is equal to all other Jews. It should be non-Jews. And he constitutes an obstruction. This is likewise the ruling of the Ben Ish Chai. The Kavachaim Sofer adds in the name of the Bet David, the Machzik Beracha, that this halacha applies to all non-Jews, male or female. Doesn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl. Okay, what about the filth is not in view? The Rishon LeZion cites of the Gaon Vilna, ruling that if the cantor and the Minyan are in one building, an individual is listening from another building, that individual may respond to the cantor's prayers even if there's a non-Jew or filth between them, since neither of them can see it. This concurs with the ruling of the response of the Shar Shelomo Surafa, and the response of Minchat Elazar and the Lacha Brura cited this as halacha in practice. The plain words of the Shulchan Aruch, however, seem to contradict this. The Ben Ish Chai says, even if there's going to be several buildings between this person and those people, he may respond to Kaddish as long as there's no filth or non-Jews between them, clearly suggesting the non-Jew is an obstacle even though he's blocked from view by the houses between, by the individual, the Minyan. The ruling of the response of the Shulchan Shlomo concurs with this, saying, of course, even if the person cannot see the filth or the non-Jew, it is forbidden, right? And even if he's more than Daled Amot from the point where the filth is there, still going to be prohibited. The Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Berurah asserted that the Ramah disagreed fundamentally with the Shulchan Aruch and ruled that one may respond to the cantor even if there's filth between them. The response to Shar Shlomo Surafa concurred that as long as the cantor is in one building and the person is in another, it does not matter if the filth or the non-Jew is in the space between the two buildings, as mentioned previously. Likewise, the Petach HaDavid ruled that if a neighbor can hear the voice of the cantor through his window and the window of the synagogue, and those windows are higher than 10 tfachim from the ground, the neighbor may respond to the cantor's prayers. He added that this is especially so if the neighbor is not aware of any filth being on the ground between them. Nevertheless, it appears that the Shulchan Aruch disagreed with this distinction, and Minchat Elazar argued that the sound waves of the cantor's voice spread in every direction, okay, and therefore including down on the filth of the ground and up to the window. Therefore, he ruled that it's forbidden to respond, and the Shevet Yehuda ben David also suggested that we should not rely on the lenient opinion and the response of the Yechavedat. What about if it's going to be heard on a radio or a telephone? אתה שומע את זה בטלפון או ברדיו. So it says that Rishon LeZion combined this discussion to the question of one person is listening to someone else saying a beracha over the telephone or live broadcast on the radio. It can be assumed that somewhere along the distance between, right, the speaker and the person listening, some deposit or filth or a church or a non-Jew is present. If so, the person listening should not be permitted to respond to the blessing or Kaddish. His conclusion to permit it is relying on the opinion of the Gaon Vilna and Shlomo that it is permitted as long as this listener cannot see the filth or the non-Jew. In light of the above discussion and the poskim cited, this ruling is not at all simple. It should be noted that the issue being discussed here is whether or not the listener may respond to the berachot he hears over the telephone or the radio. The listener certainly cannot rely upon the broadcast to fulfill his obligation of saying berachot, right, or anything like that. Basically, can you answer or not? But it's not that you're going to be used to the chovah. As explained in the Yalkut Yosef Purim edition, nowadays there's an added complication regarding live audio broadcasts, and that there's generally a time lapse of a few seconds, and therefore it becomes a problem. So it's not actually live. Okay? 372. This was for Mordechai. That what happens if you're in the Bet Knesset, right, and they're in the same domain, and then the goy passes by. So he says this is the ruling of the Bet David cited by the Machzik Beracha and Kavachaim Sofer. When a Jew is outside of the synagogue, he's not part of the minyan, and therefore he may respond to the Chazan is right, is because there's no physical barrier to stop the Shekhinah. But if the non-Jew blocks the way, there is a barrier, and therefore he cannot. But if the non-Jew walks in the synagogue, his presence cannot stop all the Jews inside to be counted as a minyan. The Shekhinah is still there, even though there's a goy. Based on this, Ben Ish Chai states that the presence of a filth or a non-Jew constitutes obstruction, and the listener may not respond applies to when the listener is outside and is not a member of the minyan. But if he's together with the minyan, even if the non-Jew is inside, standing between him and the others, he could still answer Kaddish. So even if he would come and sit right in front of you, you could still answer. The rabbi must make sure that the congregation is aware of the halacha, since it's common for non-Jews to position themselves at the synagogue's entrance and to ply their wares to the Jews walking in and out. If someone is outside and beyond the non-Jew and hears people are saying Kaddish inside, he cannot answer. But if the non-Jew would walk inside the synagogue, now he would be able to answer. The Ben Yedid in the response to Halif Lecha Shlomo Kluger ruled that a non-Jew's presence is an obstacle even within the synagogue. So according to them it does. But the most of the Chronim, they say no, there's no problem. In fact, the Ya'alat Chen Ohev Tzion demonstrated that a carefully reading the Baturim and the Bet Yosef show clearly that he's correct. Right, the Bet David is correct, although the Shevet Miuda complained that no other poskim made this distinction brought down by the Bet David. Next halacha, non-Jews residing above the synagogue. What happens if you have the goy living above the synagogue? That happens, by the way, in many places, that they used to have like a shamash, but a goy. So for example, in Venezuela, I still remember until today, the goy lived in the synagogue. He was like the shamash. So he lived in the synagogue. So if a synagogue is located in an apartment building, it is permitted to pray there, even if a non-Jew resides in the apartment above it. Or for example, you're in an apartment building, and right above it is goy. You could still pray there. This is the ruling of the Chavadat, based on the response of Divrei Yisachar, that in the case of the non-Jews are not located between the Jews who are praying, although one might argue the non-Jews prevent the prayers from rising to heaven, there's no source to support. Ulai zelo leila shamayim. The prayers don't go up to the shamayim. Well, we still say that it does, and there's no problem whatsoever.